Secretary General of NATO, Mircea Geoană. Mircea, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Washington. The Director of National Intelligence here in Washington, Avril Haines, says that the Russians may want to move beyond simply controlling southern Ukraine and move all the way towards Moldova right now. Do you expect that to happen?
I met Director Haines yesterday, and we compared notes together with the administration, and we are very similar analysis. There is a significant mismatch between the level of political ambition of President Putin, that we believe he didn't abandon his original plan to basically occupy or at least decapitate the regime in Kiev.
But he failed to do that.
He failed to do that. So he continues to have a high level of ambition, while the military capabilities, what he has on the ground, the defeat ahead around Kiev, the fact that how difficult it is to boost up the morale of the troops. So in a way that we see a delta, a mismatch between political ambitions and capabilities. Director Haines is also right, she's right, in basically saying that the moment there is this kind of mismatch, the risk of somewhat ad hoc decisions that are basically not taking into account the reality on the ground, the fierce resistance of the Ukrainians, the support they get from allied nations, that could prove a certain risk.
So do you think NATO is prepared now for Putin and the Russians doubling down right now? Because the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency over at the Pentagon says Putin could call up thousands more troops by simply officially declaring a war is underway.
He didn't do this at the 9th of May parade.
He didn't do it then.
He didn't do it then. I think there is also, we believe there is a certain political difficulty, even for him, to call on the Russian people to send more of the youngsters to go into a place where most of their fellow countrymen and soldiers basically were either killed or wounded. So NATO has a triple obligation, and we do it at the same time. First, we continue to help Ukraine in their brave fight for their land. We do that, we do it successfully, we do it at the speed of relevance. Secondly, the business of NATO is to protect NATO countries. So we are boosting our presence on the eastern flank significantly. And for the first time since the creation of NATO, we have activated NATO defense plans for the eastern flank of NATO. Thirdly, the obligation we have as a corollary of the first two is to make sure that we don't escalate already a very bloody war between Russia and Ukraine into a war between NATO and Russia. So this is the role of NATO, to support Ukraine, we do that. To defend NATO allies, we do that. And also to make sure that we minimize the risk of escalation.
Is it already a done deal that both Finland and Sweden are about to formally, officially join NATO? And Putin, he's going to react to that. How worried are you about what he might do if that happens?
Wolf, I'm a political person, and I have full respect for the democratic processes underway in both Finland and Sweden. I can say one thing. If they decide, it's the democratic role of these nations to decide. And if they would apply for NATO membership, I can say one thing. They will be welcomed warmly and expeditiously.
Why would they be welcomed warmly and expeditiously, but Ukraine, which has been trying to join NATO for years, is not necessarily being warmly and expeditiously welcomed?
Listen, Wolf, I'm coming from Romania. And I was ambassador here in Washington. We worked so hard for over many, many years to get our countries into NATO and the European Union. There's a huge difference between a post-communist country with many reforms to make, with economies to reform, militaries to reform. And when we look to Finland and Sweden, they are high-end democracies, exceptionally strong economies, and they're already very interoperable with NATO. I'm not saying that our support for Ukraine or for Georgia, for that matter, should be less important. But the moment, what's the lesson of this decision by Finland and Sweden if they make the decision?
You think they will?
I cannot prejudge, but I say we see signs that they are preparing to take a decision. If the decision will be positive, we'll respond positively. But we see that basically on every front, President Putin gets the opposite of his original intention. He hoped that we'll have a weak NATO. He has a strong NATO. He hoped that will be America's allies in Europe and in the world will basically be shaky. We are stronger than ever. And also, what probably he was expecting less was this fear, brave resilience, and resistance of the Ukrainian people themselves. So I think on everything, from Finland and Sweden eventually joining, from Ukraine resisting bravely, for NATO being united, for America leading with real leadership sense, I think that he's getting the opposite of his original intentions.